Welcome back to Ancient Egyptian Object Stories. In this episode, we will examine a jar label inscribed with the name of King Den and what it reveals to us about early kingship and the Royal Jubilee Festival. This object dates to the Early Dynastic period and is inscribed with the name of the fifth king of the First Dynasty, Den. His name, made up of a hand and water hieroglyph, is written inside a serach, which is meant to represent a king's palace in elevation and in plan. The name inside this shape indicates that the king is inside his palace. A falcon representing Horus stands on top of the serach to show the king's identification with this god. Altogether, this arrangement is called a Horus name, the first name in the standard 5 names of Egyptian kings. We saw a three-dimensional form of the Horus name serach in episode 2 of the Ancient Egyptian Object Stories series. This ebony wood label comes from the tomb of Den in Abydos. The hole in the top right corner indicates that it had been attached to a jar by a fiber or leather string, and the contents of the jar was likely oil because the hieroglyphs on the bottom left identify the finest oil of Chehennu. The oil jar to which this label would have belonged was buried in Den's tomb along with several other objects, including a pair of sandals that were also accompanied by a label. This object story will examine the art of the oil jar label, which displays the celebration of Den's heb-sed, or Jubilee Festival. The label was found in the excavation carried out from the winter of 1899 to 1900, along with numerous other objects that have helped to shed light on the earliest kings of Egypt and the arcane rituals they carried out during their reign. The label's decoration is divided into 2 parts. On the left-hand side, there are several hieroglyphs, and on the right side, there are 4 registers containing 2 male figures, various animals, and other symbolic imagery. The hieroglyphs on the top left reveal a name pertaining to an oil press, which has been read as Gold Palace Oil Press. However, the top left corner of the label has broken away, so the name remains uncertain. Beside the oil press name is the name of an administrator, Hemmaka, who probably was the one who donated the oil jar. Beside the name Hemmaka is the serach containing the Horus name of King Den. The jumble of hieroglyphs below this pertains to the oil itself. In the bottom right corner, a piece of the label is missing, but from what survives, it appears that the 2 bottom registers contain rows of birds and illegible hieroglyphs. The register above has a more complex composition of questionably executed hieroglyphs, which have been translated in various ways. What is of most interest is the top right register showing 2 human figures. The seated figure was identified by earlier archaeologists as the god Osiris, but the regalia, such as the double crown symbolizing a unified Upper and Lower Egypt, actually indicates that this is a king. He is enthroned on a dais covered by a canopy. He is dressed in a close-fitting wraparound garment and holds the crook and flail insignia. The man who is shown running is also wearing the double crown and carries royal insignia. Therefore, he is a second representation of King Den. He is flanked by 2 vertical rows of 3 half-moon shapes. Such a motif is found on several other early dynastic objects, such as the mace head of King Narmer. Clearly, this motif is especially connected to kingship, and it has been identified as a depiction of the heb-sed, or Jubilee Festival. Early depictions of the festival and objects dating throughout the early dynastic phase most often show 2 of the most important rituals performed, but more representations of what the festival entailed appear in the reign of King Djoser in the 3rd dynasty. Djoser's funerary complex is noted for its largest feature, the stepped pyramid, which was not only the first pyramid but also the first monument built entirely of stone. However, it is not the pyramid that interests us now, but rather the huge courtyard and structures on the south and east sides of the complex. Overall, the southern half of the complex served as a permanent model Jubilee court, with dummy buildings made of stone, and wall reliefs in the so-called South Tomb that show Djoser performing heb-sed rituals. Thus, the Jubilee is represented both in 2- and 3-dimensional forms. One of the main features is the ritual where the king must run between or around half-moon-shaped boundary markers that symbolized the unified Egypt to display his vitality and power over the entire country. Relief panels in the South Tomb of the complex show Djoser running between these markers in the same way as the king in the Den label. This confirms that we are looking at a representation of one of the said festival rituals. The enthronement is another aspect of the festival. Usually, in Egyptian art, the king is depicted doubly, as a mirror image, where he is enthroned wearing a white crown of Upper Egypt on one side and wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt on the other side, and usually dressed in a wraparound garment. The Den label appears to be portraying the same ritual, but in shorthand. Not only is there one throne, but also Den is wearing the double crown, a convenient way to illustrate a symbolically charged motif within a tiny space. A statue of the last king of the Second Dynasty, Kheruef, depicts him wearing the wraparound garments traditionally worn during the said festival. The statue conveys Kheruef's power not only by expressing his re-establishment as king, represented by the heb-sed garment, but also by the text under his feet that documents a large number of enemies that he defeated. The said festival was thus a way for the king to prove his strength, which in turn authenticated his right to rule. Later in the Old Kingdom, it became tradition for the king to celebrate his jubilee after 30 years of rule, and every 3 or 4 years thereafter. However, many kings celebrated their said festival well before their 30th year. The order of rituals performed during the jubilee begins with the boundary marker running, followed by the enthronement after the king has proved his strength. On the Den label, the 2 representations of the king may be read as hieroglyphs, which, in this case, the direction of reading would be from right to left. In this way, the Den label confirms the running precedes the enthronement. One last feature of the Den label is the hook-shaped line on the far right side. This is the hieroglyph meaning year. Therefore, it has been interpreted that the entire right half of the label actually serves as the name of the year, perhaps the year of the heb-sed. The said festival remained a major part of kingship in ancient Egypt, but encountered changes or developments over time. Even in the reign of the so-called heretic king Akhenaten, the said festival was incorporated into his new religious program, and he celebrated it in his 2nd year of rule. Doubtless, we will revisit the said festival in future episodes of Ancient Egyptian Object Stories. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will join me again for my next Ancient Egyptian Object story. For further reading, please see the description box below. If you liked this video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to be notified of future content.